Genghis Khan's fake retreat. By 1206, Genghis Khan had united the Mongol tribes into a single army, and almost every enemy he faced still outnumbered him on paper. His opponents had heavier cavalry, larger infantry formations, and thick castle walls. What Genghis Khan had was speed. Every rider carried several horses and switched mounts before any of them tired, letting the Mongol army cover distances no other force on Earth could match. And every one of those riders carried a short, powerful composite bow, a weapon built from wood, horn, and sinew that let a man fire accurately in any direction while riding at a full gallop, including backward. That last detail made a strategy possible that would have destroyed any other army that tried it. The Mongols would open with a charge, firing volley after volley of arrows into the enemy line. Then, without warning, they would turn their horses and run. To the enemy, this looked like a collapse. Men shouted like they were panicking. Equipment dropped in the retreat. From a distance, there was no way to tell a real route from a fake one. So the enemy did what any confident commander does when the other side appears to break. They gave chase. Heavy cavalry surged ahead of the infantry to close the gap. Commanders lost their grip on formation. An army that had started the day as one disciplined force stretched out over kilometers of open ground, hunting a target that never seemed to get any closer. The chase could last for hours, sometimes days. Armored soldiers and their horses wore themselves down, while the Mongols, still mounted, still turning in the saddle to fire behind them, never stopped being a threat. By the time the enemy was exhausted, spread thin, and separated from its own supply lines, the retreat stopped. Hidden units the enemy never knew were there appeared on both flanks. Horse archers surrounded what was left of the formation and fired from every direction at once. Only after the arrows had done their work did the Mongols close in with sabers and lances for what was usually a short, one-sided fight. It worked because it turned an enemy's confidence into the exact weapon that destroyed him. An army that believes it's winning stops thinking. That was the only opening Genghis Khan ever needed. The Trojan Horse. According to the legend, 10 years of siege had failed to open the gates of Troy. The Greek army had landed on the beaches below the city with over 1,000 ships. They had the numbers. They had the heroes: Achilles, Ajax, Agamemnon. What they didn't have was a way inside. Troy's walls were high, its defenders disciplined, and every direct assault had ended the same way. By the 10th year, the greatest warriors on both sides had died, including Achilles himself, killed by an arrow through the one part of his body that could kill him. The Greeks understood something simple. They could not win this war with strength. They needed the Trojans to open the gates themselves. The plan came from Odysseus, a king not known for his size or his sword arm, but for the way he thought. His idea was to build something the Trojans would want to bring inside their own walls. The Greeks constructed a massive wooden horse. Inside its hollow body, they hid a small force of soldiers. Ancient sources put the number anywhere from 20 to over 50 men. Then, the rest of the army burned their own camps, boarded their ships, and sailed away in plain sight of the city. They didn't go far. The fleet hid behind the nearby island of Tenedos, waiting. Outside the walls, the Trojans found only two things left behind: the horse and one Greek soldier named Sinon. He told them the war was over. He said the Greeks had given up and built the horse as an offering to the gods, and that destroying it would bring a curse down on Troy. It was a lie. Most of the city believed it anyway. One priest didn't. Laocoon warned the Trojans not to trust it and threw a spear into the horse's side. Moments later, according to the myth, two serpents rose from the sea and killed him along with his sons. To a city already looking for a reason to believe, it read as divine punishment for doubting the gift. The Trojans tore down part of their own wall to drag the horse inside. That night, the city celebrated. There was music, wine, 10 years of grief finally sat down. By the time the streets went quiet, nobody was watching the horse anymore. Sinon opened the hatch in the dark. The hidden soldiers climbed out, killed the guards, and opened the gates from the inside. The fleet that had never really left came back across the water and poured into the city while it slept. Troy fell in a single night. 10 years of siege had failed. Zhuge Liang's empty fort strategy. By 228 AD, China had split into 3 warring kingdoms, and one of them had almost nothing left to defend itself with. Zhuge Liang, chief strategist for the kingdom kingdom of Shu learned that a massive army under the Wei general Sima Yi was closing in on a lightly garrisoned city, one where most of the experienced soldiers were away on campaign. What remained inside the walls was a handful of officials, some servants, and almost no military force capable of stopping an assault. A normal commander would have shut the gates, armed every civilian who could hold a weapon, and prepared to die defending the walls. Zhuge Liang did the opposite. He ordered his few remaining soldiers to hide completely out of sight. The city gates were thrown open. No archers appeared on the walls. No formations. Old men swept the streets like it was any other morning. Then Zhuge Liang climbed onto the wall himself, sat down in plain view of the approaching Wei army, and began playing a stringed instrument called the gu qin. Sima Yi's scouts reported what they saw: an empty-looking city with its gates wide open and its most famous strategist calmly playing music on the wall, as if nothing in the world could touch him. Sima Yi knew Zhuge Liang's reputation. He had never known him to be careless, and an open gate with no visible defense made no sense, unless there was something behind it he couldn't see. He imagined archers waiting just out of sight. He imagined cavalry hidden in the streets. The calmer Zhuge Liang appeared, the more dangerous the situation felt. Sima Yi ordered his army to withdraw. The city was never touched. No arrow was fired. No wall was breached. A near-empty fortress survived a full-scale army because its defender understood something about his enemy, that a cautious man fears an easy victory far more than a hard one. Battle of Trasimene. By 217 BC, Rome had already lost one army to Hannibal Barca at the Battle of the Trebia, and it wanted revenge. The Roman consul sent to get it was Gaius Flaminius, aggressive, proud, and in a hurry to catch the Carthaginian commander before he could slip away again. Hannibal understood exactly what kind of man he was chasing. He found a stretch of ground on the northern shore of Lake Trasimene, where a narrow road ran between the water on one side and steep wooded hills on the other. It was the only practical route forward for an army moving fast, and it was perfect for hiding one. Hannibal split his forces and placed them out of sight along the hills and in the valleys overlooking the road. Light infantry near the entrance, heavy infantry behind the ridge lines, cavalry further along the path. From where the Romans would be marching, the ground looked almost empty. He left a portion of his army visible in the distance, appearing to retreat. Flaminius took the bait. He pushed his men forward without properly scouting the terrain ahead, eager to close the distance. The Roman column stretched for miles as it entered the valley. The front of the line couldn't see the rear. Officers lost contact with their own men. Then a thick morning fog settled over the water, and the Romans lost the ability to see much of anything at all. At the moment the entire column was inside the trap, Hannibal gave the signal. War horns sounded from the hills. Thousands of Carthaginian soldiers came down from every direction at once. Many Roman soldiers never got their weapons up. Some were pushed toward the lake and drowned trying to escape. Flaminius tried to rally what was left of his formation and was killed in the fighting. The battle lasted only a few hours. Roughly 15,000 Roman soldiers were killed, with thousands more taken prisoner. It remains one of the worst single-day defeats in Roman military history, and it happened because one commander was too impatient to check what was waiting in the hills above him. Alexander the Great at Gaugamela. In 331 BC, Darius III of Persia gathered what he believed was his last chance to stop Alexander the Great. He had already lost to Alexander twice. Ancient writers claimed his army numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Modern historians believe the real figure was still likely far larger than the roughly 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry Alexander commanded. This time, Darius chose the battlefield himself, a wide, flat plain near Gaugamela, cleared and leveled specifically to give his scythed chariots and heavy cavalry room to operate without obstruction. It looked, on paper, like ground built to destroy the Macedonians. Alexander refused to attack it head-on. Instead, as the battle began, he did something that confused the Persian commanders watching from across the field. He moved sideways. Not forward, not in retreat, sideways, along the Persian line, forcing Darius to shift his own formation to match and avoid being outflanked. As the Persian army stretched to keep pace, small gaps began to open in its center, the exact weakness that thousands of soldiers arranged for a head-on collision hadn't been built to cover. Alexander saw the opening the moment it appeared. He gathered his elite companion cavalry into a tight wedge and charged, not at the Persian army, at Darius himself. The cavalry tore through the gap. Seeing Alexander's charge closing on his position, Darius fled the field. Once the king ran, the certainty holding the Persian army together went with him. Word spread through the ranks faster than any order could stop it. Units broke and retreated, even where they still outnumbered the Macedonians facing them. Alexander's own left wing, under his general Parmenion, was under heavy pressure at the same moment, and Alexander turned back from the pursuit to reinforce it rather than run Darius down. Darius escaped. It didn't matter. The battle was already won. Napoleon at Austerlitz. In 1805, Austria, Russia, and Britain formed the Third Coalition to stop Napoleon's expansion across Europe, and their combined forces believed they had him beaten before the battle even began. Many Allied officers were convinced Napoleon's army was tired, outnumbered, and looking to avoid a fight. Napoleon knew exactly what they believed. Instead of correcting it, he encouraged it. The battlefield outside the town of Austerlitz was dominated by one piece of high ground, the Pratzen Heights. Whoever held it controlled the field. Every instinct told the commander to seize it immediately. Napoleon deliberately abandoned it. To the Allies watching from across the field, it looked like exactly the mistake they'd been expecting from a weakened French army. For days beforehand, Napoleon had let reports of a vulnerable right flank circulate, delaying troop movements so his position would look thinner than it actually was. The Allied commanders took the bait. They committed a large portion of their force to attack Napoleon's supposedly weak right flank, pulling troops off the Pratzen Heights to do it. The moment they abandoned the high ground, their own center collapsed into a gap. Napoleon had been waiting for exactly that. As the morning fog lifted and he watched the Allied columns march away from the heights, he gave the order. Marshal Nicolas Soult led French divisions straight up the slope and seized the position the Allies had just given away. With the heights in French hands, the Allied army was cut into disconnected pieces. Communication broke down between units that could no longer see or reach each other. French forces attacked from multiple directions at once, and the Allied line came apart. Some retreating troops fled across frozen ponds, and accounts, later somewhat exaggerated, describe French artillery firing on the ice to break it beneath them. By the end of the day, the coalition army had suffered a decisive defeat. Operation Fortitude, World War II. By early 1944, Adolf Hitler knew an Allied invasion of France was coming. He didn't know where, and he didn't know when. Germany had thousands of soldiers, bunkers, and coastal guns spread across Western Europe. If Hitler guessed correctly and concentrated his strongest forces at the real landing site, the Allied invasion could fail in its first hours. The Allies needed him to guess wrong. The closest crossing point between England and France was Pas-de-Calais, and German commanders already believed it was the most likely target. The real invasion would strike much farther southwest, at Normandy. Rather than trying to erase Hitler's existing belief, the Allies decided to feed it. The plan was called Operation Fortitude, and its centerpiece was an army that didn't exist. The Allies invented an entire fictional force, the 1st U.S. Army Group, and built the evidence to back it up. Inflatable rubber tanks were positioned where German reconnaissance planes could photograph them. Wooden aircraft sat parked on fake airfields. Dummy landing craft filled harbors that German pilots flew over and reported as real. Radio operators sent thousands of fake transmissions, describing divisions moving, requesting supplies, and preparing for an assault that would never come. German intelligence intercepted all of it and believed what they were hearing. The most important piece wasn't the tanks, it was the double agents. British intelligence had turned a number of captured German spies, feeding them controlled information to send back to their handlers. One of them, a Spanish operative codenamed Garbo, built such credibility with German intelligence that his reports were trusted completely, while every word of them served the deception. To command this fictional army, the Allies put General George S. Patton in apparent charge. Germany considered Patton one of the most aggressive commanders in the Allied ranks. If Patton was massed near Calais, German logic followed. The real invasion had to be coming there too. On June 6, 1944, the actual invasion landed on the beaches of Normandy. German field commanders reported the attack immediately. Hitler hesitated. He believed it was a diversion, that the real assault, the one led by Patton's Phantom Army, was still coming at Calais. Powerful German divisions stayed put in the Calais region for weeks after the Normandy landing, waiting for a second invasion that would never arrive. That delay gave Allied forces critical time to secure their beachhead and push inland Finland before Germany could respond with everything it had. Operation Fortitude is widely regarded as one of the most successful deception campaigns in military history. A war won partly by an army built entirely out of rubber, wood, and radio static.
Battle of Red Cliffs.
In 208 AD, the warlord Cao Cao controlled nearly all of northern China and believed only the south stood between him and a unified empire. His army was enormous. Modern historians place it somewhere around 200,000 men, though ancient accounts claimed far more. Against him stood an uneasy alliance between two rival southern warlords, Sun Quan and Liu Bei, who understood that fighting Cao Cao separately meant losing separately. Cao Cao's problem wasn't the size of his army, it was the water. His soldiers were battle-tested on land and completely unprepared for a naval campaign along the Yangtze River. Seasickness spread through the ranks. Men who could hold a battle line on solid ground couldn't stay upright on a rolling deck. His advisors offered a fix: chain the ships together, hull to hull, so the decks would stay steadier and the horses could stand without stumbling. It solved the seasickness. It also turned the entire fleet into a single connected target. The Southern Alliance's commander, Zhou Yu, saw the vulnerability immediately. His army was too small to win a conventional naval battle, but fire doesn't care about army size. A general named Huang Gai staged a fake defection, sending word to Cao Cao that he wished to surrender and switch sides. Cao Cao believed him. Huang Gai then loaded several ships with dry reeds, oil, and firewood, vessels built to look ordinary from a distance and burn everything they touched up close. The alliance waited for the wind to turn in their favor. When it finally shifted, the fire ship sailed straight for Cao Cao's chained fleet, their crews escaping into small boats just before impact. The ships collided. Flames jumped from hull to hull with nothing to stop them. Smoke filled the river. Burning vessels crashed into each other while their crews jumped into the water. The southern fleet attacked at the same moment, striking an enemy that was already burning and had nowhere to go. Cao Cao's army was forced into a retreat north, weakened further by disease and bad weather along the way. His ambition to unify China under his own rule ended on the river that night, undone by a decision meant to solve seasickness.